Thank you so
welcome.
much. All right. Thanks very much for being here. Welcome to the very first show of Sports, Shorts, and More.
Yes.
And it's just short sports. It's not
short shorts or anything
no,
like that.
No, short shorts. No. So, Chris, Bill, Chris came to me a week ago.
Yes.
And said, hey, what if we did a sports talk show? And I said, hey, I think that's the best idea I've ever heard.
Because we have, we do art classes, we do music, we do all kinds of other classes, but there's really never anything tied to sports. And I thought, sports can influence one's recovery. And so let's see if there's a way to incorporate sports into what we do.
Yeah. So before we get going, I wanted to read something that I put together for you, just to kind of let you know why we're doing what we're doing. And then we'll get into it. So if you will bear with me, please. I remember sitting in Chris's office a couple of weeks ago and telling him how much I miss sports. Remember that?
I do.
Not a particular sport, just the very idea of sports. Sports for me has always been a means to an end, a way to connect with the world outside myself. As long as I could find something live on TV, I was hooked. 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, ESPNU has the Wagner, William and Mary Williams JV lacrosse game. And by the last quarter, I'm screaming, come on, Tiffany, that's your shot. Power up and launch. That's just the joy of competition, the joy of sport. Lately, it's become so much more to me because of the new rules that we're living under these days. Until the NBA decided to call off all games, with every sport following suit shortly, watching live sports was a way for me to plug into the world, to be connected to people. Call it my community, because that's what it is. To feel like I was participating in something that not only took my mind off of what was going on every continent and in almost every household, but that also still gave me the joy of victory. And yes, more often, to borrow a phrase from the wide world of sports, the agony of defeat. Either way, I was plugged in. I was a part of something larger than myself, something that seemed to say things are going to be all right. The Reds are going to come out of the gate struggling, and then they're going to make a run somewhere in June, and once again give me hope, albeit short-lived. But not this year. Ever since Rudy Gobert made his ill-advised joke by touching all the microphones in the press room, we've been watching games that happened years ago. Great games, no doubt. Some of the best ever. But that connection with the outside world is missing because the sports are no longer live. And I thought that was the end of it. For now, at least. And really, who knows for how long. The Dolphins are talking about putting 15,000 fans in a stadium that's built for 65,000 people. But to be honest, I'll be shocked if we have a 16-game NFL season this year. So yeah, I thought I'd have to find another way to connect to people. People that I'll never meet, but that I share so much with. But thankfully I was wrong, and in a good way. It turns out that sports is about community. Whether they're live or whether we're biting our nails knowing full well what the outcome of the 2004 ALCS is going to be as we watch the game on ESPN. In case you don't remember, the Yankees had the Red Sox down 3-0. Red Sox came back and won 4 in a row and then swept the Cardinals, which I loved, to win their last 8 games and win the World Series, beating the curse of the Bambino finally, right? That was the first time.
Took a long time.
It did take a long time. Community. It's one of the words you'll hear more often at the RC. We're a community of peers, survivors, men and women who are struggling to beat the odds and leaning on each other every step of the way. Because that's what peers do for peers. Whether it's cheering together at BW3 with 200 other Buckeye fans when Michigan takes their now annual beatdown, or whether it's laughing together because another endless night has turned into morning, and we're all getting together for morning meeting right here in Angela's room. Community is community is community, and it's the binding strap that holds us together, literally and figuratively. That's what sports has become for me now, and in a strange way, it means even more now than it did 3 months ago when James Harden was going for 50, 12, and 14 in another basketball clinic. I give my heart to my community, and I get the acceptance and love of my very favorite people in the world, my people, my community. And whether that's through sports or the honesty of David's bipolar and depression support group, it's the same feeling. I feel like I belong because we belong. We belong to each other, and we belong to the community at large. And that feeling makes all the difference in our lives. And that's why we decided that we would talk about sports.
Yes. And there's a lot of different reasons to do this, and one of the main reasons is there are a lot of emotional, social, and physical benefits to just talking about sports, to being a sports fan, or having your favorite sports team. And I know a lot of folks might be saying, Chris, you're from Cincinnati. The Reds haven't won a divisional playoff since 1995. The Bengals haven't won a playoff game since 1991. Bill's a Texas Ranger fan. They've never won a World Series. Came one strike away from winning a World Series.
Thanks for tearing that scab off. I appreciate that.
You're quite welcome. And there's a lot of high blood pressure moments that come from trying to be a fan of those teams and other teams that are out there as well. But there is also a silver lining. There's a lot of great research out there that shows there are some tremendous benefits to being a sports fan.
And this is really cool. I didn't know this until you showed this to me. So you want to talk about the research a little bit?
So yeah, I'd like to do that. So there is a professor at Murray State. His name is Daniel Wan, and he has a book. He's an author of the book, Sports Fans, The Psychology and Social Impact of Spectators. And it talks about the very real mental health advantages to claiming a sports team as your own. And that, being this kind of a super fan type person, it's linked to higher levels of well-being and general happiness, as well as lower levels of loneliness and isolation. So we're going to talk about some of the things that, he mentions in his book. And I know for myself, and I think I can speak for Bill as well, that people are looking for ways to identify with something, to feel this sense of belonging to a group of like-minded individuals. And I know for myself, my friendships, even to this day, a lot of them go back to when I was a kid playing sports, or back to when I was in high school playing sports. Guys I played basketball with 30, 40 years ago, I'm still friends with today. One of the guys I played basketball with is now the coach of my youngest son and his amazing basketball team, which is really cool. And we still get together and talk about some of the memories of whether it was a pickup game or an old game we played in. We just kind of had that camaraderie, and it kind of brings us that identity and that sense of community. So we want to talk about some of the things in the book, and I think one of the first things is that being a fan gives you a built-in community. You gain these connections, which in turn, you increase your social and psychological health.
And that's actually Daniel Wan's word, right? Community.
Yes.
He used the word community.
Yes.
So
I think an example, in kind of doing a little bit of the research on this was, like for me, I've got a UC shirt on. And so if, UC's got a football game, and I happen to be at Kroger's, or if I got an Ohio State shirt on, I happen to be at Kroger's either before or after the game, I can guarantee you at least 2 or 3 people are going to say to me, hey, did you watch the game today? Or are you going to watch the game today? Or what did you think about that run by J.K. Dobbins? Or what did you think about that defensive play by Chase Young?
It's an automatic conversation starter.
Exactly. Or, back in the day with UC basketball, especially when Bob Huggins was the coach, if you had a UC basketball shirt on, you couldn't go anywhere without, somebody stopping and talk about UC basketball.
Yeah.
Bob Huggins back in the day was one of those people who just was kind of a lightning rod of talking about his teams and things of that nature. So, being, having the shirt on and things like that, it's amazing how you strike up these conversations with people. I know you've got a soccer shirt on.
I've got a soccer shirt on. I've got a Chelsea Football Club shirt on, and kind of goes back to my my tongue-in-cheek comment about the Wagner and William & Mary women's JV lacrosse team. I can get into any sport I can watch and get into it. And I'm not a soccer fan. I don't understand soccer. It's kind of boring to me a little bit sometimes. But I watched Chelsea play in the Premier League finals and had no idea who they were. I can't even remember who they played to this day. But they went into penalty kicks. The game was that close. It was tied. And their star, John Terry, was the 5th one up to kick. And all he had to do was put the ball in the net. And that's a 75% shot. And he approached the ball and slipped on the wet grass. And it was heartbreaking for me. And I had no idea who these people were. But I was that invested all of a sudden. And so that's why I wear my Chelsea shirt.
And even, not related to sports, it's amazing the power of a shirt. I was telling Bill a story yesterday where I have this Navy SEAL shirt
And where did you get the Navy SEAL shirt?
at Target.
I love that.
And I was going to wear it today. It was kind of cold out for a t-shirt, so it's in my car. But my family just loves to make fun of me because whenever I wear that shirt, especially on vacation, people come up to me and will say, "Thank you for your service," or want to talk to me about being a Navy SEAL. And then I have to say to them, "Hey, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm just trying to I support the Navy SEALs and other folks by buying shirts through Target. I have an Army shirt and some other shirts. Still looking for that Coast Guard shirt.
Coast Guard, yep.
But one of my favorite stories was we were at Busch Gardens, and this guy comes up to me. He said, "Hey, I want to buy your lunch." I was like, "You don't have to do that." He goes, "No, I want to thank you for your service, for being a Navy SEAL." And he says to me, and I'm always hard of hearing. I got terrible hearing, and I thought he said something along the lines of, what area do you of the country do you protect? And I thought, all right, I'm just going to play along. And me being from Ohio, couldn't think of anything, so I said, "Well, I protect the North Coast." Meaning, I guess the boundary between Ohio and Canada and
right.
Lake Erie.
And
So,
you'll all be very, very glad to know that it's a safe border.
it is a very safe
Yes.
border. But it's amazing what a shirt and the conversations you can strike up with people can do.
Trivia, it's the longest unprotected border in the world.
The
You know this?
U.S.-Canada border?
US-Canada border. Yes, it is. Yep.
Well,
My favorite story that you told about your Navy SEAL shirt was the person that did not believe that you were not a Navy SEAL.
I know. I was like, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I might have looked like a Navy SEAL, but this unchiseled body now is not anything SEAL-like. But yeah, it's amazing what a shirt can do when it comes to striking up conversation, especially if it's a shirt with a favorite soccer team or a university or a school that you enjoy.
And you know what, Chris, for guys particularly, sometimes I know at my age, it's tough to make friends. It just is. And I've been able to do that through sports.
And I have too. I mean, a lot of my closest friends are people I've played sports with growing up. And the other thing Daniel Wan talks about is the common language of sports. And if you think about it, and in my family grew up football fans. So my grandfather, 90% of the time when you would see him, would be asleep on the couch. But on Sunday, he was awake, and because he was not going to miss football, and he wanted to talk football. I think 90% of the conversations I had with him were about football, whether it was the Dallas Cowboys or the Cincinnati Bengals. So, I could be in a room with myself, my father, and my grandfather, and that was the one common thread that we had was our love of football. And we could talk about that. If you didn't talk about football, then the room got pretty quiet and silent, but it was the one bond that we had that brought us all together.
And I love that your example, and I love that Daniel says it's a 3-generation bonding.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
And that's, it's hard to do on a lot of other topics, but sports
is.
can bridge that generational gap.
Yep.
So that was another thing that was really neat about sports. And then sports is also a safe place for emotions. And I know Brian Snape's listening in, and it was funny because he said something to me the other day about, you need a kind of a sports nickname. There's a guy out there called Christopher Mad Dog Russo. And so Brian called me the Mad Dog for a minute, and I'm like, I that's just not my personality. I'm kind of even keeled. So then Brian mentioned, well, maybe we'll just call you the Mild Dog.
I love it.
And I thought that was hilarious, the Mild Dog. But somebody like me, I'm not a real emotional guy. I don't cry a lot. I just don't have those.
Unless you're watching Independence Day.
Independence Day does make me, when he flies that ship, his plane up into the spaceship, Randy Quaid. I was like, it gets to me sometimes. And that's not even a sports show. But sports can really bring out the emotions, whether laugh, cry, joy, sadness, etc.
Yeah, I think Daniel Wan says it actually makes it okay for guys to hug sometimes even.
Yes, well, not now. No, it's our 6 feet
social
apart,
distancing.
But yeah, but you're right. Which is something that we don't normally do. But you score that game-winning touchdown. It's like you want to high five somebody, you want to hug somebody.
Yeah, and if you're at the game, or even if you're watching at BW3, and your team makes the touchdown or they make the score, you're high fiving people you don't even know.
Yeah,
and they're your friends.
And one of the things we happened to kind of find with this was when it comes to sports, and actually tie into music, sports and music go together a lot of times.
A lot, yes.
You think of, I thought about Rod Stewart, and something I heard about Rod Stewart a long time ago. is one of his great songs. Actually, one of the great songs of all time. With "You're in My Heart, You're in My Soul."
Great example.
And that song, it's about a lot of things. One of it is I think some of the ladies he had friendships or just was in a relationship with, but it's also about his love of soccer. And if you want,
how he put that? He says that song is about 3 women, 2 teams, and 1 country.
And I think those 2 teams were the
Celtics? Celtics, which is his father was from Scotland, and so that's the Scottish national team. And then in England, he's a Manchester United fan.
Okay,
so that's where the United part comes from.
And I remember this last night when I went to bed when we were talking about Rod Stewart. I forgot. I went to a concert of his down in Louisville, and during that song, he busted out a bunch of soccer balls and kicked them out into the stands. So instead, usually people have the balloons they're knocking around.
Yeah.
Everybody was throwing soccer balls around.
That's really
during
cool.
That song.
I sent you a link to a video where he was singing this song, and in the background there's a big video screen, and they're just playing
soccer game and his favorite team, and it was very cool.
It is
very cool.
Yep.
So there's a tie-in too with music, and you think about that song, and you think of what a love song it is, but half of that song or so is about his love of soccer, which is really cool. And the other thing with sports is it can allow you to feel success. When your team wins, you feel good about yourself. I know my son's a huge Green Bay Packer fan, and this past year I think they were 13-3, and he after the Packer game when they won, he kind of puffed his chest out and he walked around. He had a big smile on his face, and he was happiest kid on earth. The couple of times that they lost, or they lost in the playoffs to the 49ers, you can see it. It took a day or two for him to get that bounce back.
It does. Mondays can be very tough. Mondays can be very tough in football season.
And I know I was the same way when I was a kid growing up. I was a big Bengals fan in high school, and on Monday mornings when they lost, especially to Cleveland or to Pittsburgh, I was like, I couldn't tell you what the teacher said that day. My mind was thinking about the game and how they lost because I was so absorbed into the football team and the game at that time.
And the cool thing about that, Chris, is I could go home and talk to my dad about that too, because he got it.
Yes.
And that's something that when I was 16, 17, and not the nicest guy, it kept us together.
Well, we kind of talked a lot about the benefits of it, but we really want to do now is let's talk sports.
Let's do it.
I know we've talked a little bit, but let's really talk sports. And so I want to kind of give one of the things we want to do because it is sports shorts. So we got little just short things we're going to hit. A couple things are some news updates, just that are sports related. So a couple things that I wanted to mention were last week was the NFL draft. The Bengals drafted with the first overall pick, and you get that because you are not a very good team, unfortunately. Right. Joe Burrow, who is from LSU and had one of the greatest college football seasons of all time.
Which we both think was a wonderful pick.
Yes.
The only way to go.
Yeah, I was, at first, before the college football playoffs started, I was all for Chase Young.
I was too.
For the defense. And he's a defensive lineman at Ohio State, and they're saying he's kind of a once-in-a-generation player. Mm-hmm. But then when the college football playoffs started and Joe Burrow defeated Oklahoma, I think he threw 7 touchdowns or something, ran for another one.
And then he threw 7 touchdowns in the first half of the national championship game. 48 to
against Alabama.
Yes.
I felt like if they wanted to, they could have scored 100 points. I was like, okay, this guy's the real deal.
I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't hang 100 points on Nick Saban.
That would have come back to haunt him in the future.
I think Nick
would very much punish him in the future for something like that. But Joe Burrow, it was accurate arm. Whether it was a guy's wide open, he hits him. Whether it was a tight window, he hits him. He moves around. I think a really good.
Any concern for you, Chris, that Joe Burrow had one great year and one pretty average year?
There's always that little bit of concern, but you know what? I think given the physical skills that he has, and again, you have to remember he transferred from Ohio State to LSU, so there's a learning curve.
Incredibly new program.
I love the fact that he's kind of like the stock market. If you bought him low at Ohio State, he's up here now at LSU and hopefully continues to ascend to being a Cincinnati Bengal. But with that said, with Joe Burrow, the Bengals unfortunately released one of the great guys of the NFL and in Cincinnati, which is Andy Dalton. And
just one of the nicest guys. One of the nicest guys around.
And when we talk about community, things he did in the Cincinnati community
he and
for the past 9 years
were wonderful for the community.
And his foundation just helped out so many people here. And I know he said a really nice goodbye to the city of Cincinnati. But a couple things about Andy Dalton: first 5 years, 50 wins, 26 losses in one time. I'd take that from Joe Burrow any day of the week.
That's pretty amazing.
I know the last 4 years were not as kind to Andy, but that's not all on Andy.
Not his fault.
A lot of transition on the offensive line, a lot of transition in coaching staff. So we want to wish Andy Dalton the best. He is now a Dallas Cowboy.
I like to hear that. Yes, I like to hear that. I grew up in Dallas, so I'm a big Cowboy fan, big Dak Prescott fan. But like we talked about yesterday, Dak might need just a little bit of momentum to keep him going.
I think Andy going home will do that.
Yeah, and that's true too. Andy's from Houston, from the Houston area. So
and he played college football at Texas Christian, which
TCU,
I think is right there in the Dallas area.
Trivia: TCU has the highest press box in the country.
Really?
Yes, they sure do. Highest off the ground. Don't know why that is.
Did not know that. But what are they? The froghorns? Is that right?
Horn frogs.
Horn frogs. Thank you.
And this is how you do the horn frog.
That's why I've seen Andy Dalton do that before.
Yep.
Okay.
That's horn frog.
And then just the final news piece was the sad passing of one of the greatest NFL coaches of all time.
One of the best ever.
Don Shula, an Ohio native, all-time winningest coach in NFL history.
347.
I believe that is correct. And he won a couple Super Bowls.
Went to 6.
Yep. And just an amazing coach.
When they won the second Super Bowl, they led the league in offense and defense.
And he was coach of the only perfect season in NFL history, 17-0.
1972.
Miami Dolphins, those players still get together every day. That when the last team loses, they all pop the champagne and celebrate that they've got another year. And I think it was 1972, I believe.
Yep.
And one of the interesting things about Don Shula, there's actually a tie-in to Donald Trump that we were reading about the other day. That years ago there was
83.
83 was the USFL, United States Football League, and Donald Trump owned a team, the New Jersey Generals. And Donald Trump was not afraid to spend money. He brought in some of the best players that he could try to get from the NFL.
Herschel Walker.
Herschel Walker was one of those, and he tried to get Don Shula to be the coach. And they were like this close to an agreement. Don Shula was making $400,000 to coach the Miami Dolphins, and Donald Trump offered him $5 million.
More than 10 times what he was making.
And they were close to an agreement. There was one little snag. I think Don Shula wanted an apartment in Trump Towers to live in. And they hadn't quite agreed on that yet. And Donald Trump came out publicly and said, hey, we're looking to have Don Shula as the new coach, and we just got one kind of a hold off with this. And, I just got the sense Don Shula was kind of a private guy. And when Donald Trump went public with it before it was a done deal, it made Don Shula, I think, back off.
Walked away from a $4.5 million raise. And that says a lot about Don Shula as a man.
And he went on to be a great coach. Well, he was already a great coach, but to continue being a great coach in Miami.
And you know what's interesting about that year? It was 83. That was the year that Dan Marino came out.
Okay.
And so he wouldn't have had Dan Marino. And Dan Marino threw for over 5,000 yards his second year in the league in 84.
Which was pretty amazing. Under a coach who would run the ball.
Right.
Don Shula had enough insight to know, hey, this guy, we got to change what we do.
And went to Super Bowl.
Personnel. Went to a Super Bowl. They didn't win, but went to Super Bowl with Dan Marino, and
I
helped him have a great career.
Were they? I think the Raiders maybe got him. Oh no, the Raiders got him in the divisional.
Yeah,
divisional
Redskins or 49ers. 49ers.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's what it was. So that's our news updates that we have going on. I know we had a little topic we wanted to do, which was
talk a little baseball.
Yeah,
it's baseball season, whether you know it or not. And I did ask Chris, is it really baseball season, or are we really going to call it baseball season? And we decided that we would.
And we're holding out hope.
We are holding out hope.
There will be something hopefully this summer.
Yes. Have you seen this? The NBA talking about playing in Las Vegas in the convention center. They're going to put 24 courts in and just have families
Wow, I
Yeah.
did not hear that.
Yeah, to play the entire season, play the
Okay.
entire rest of the season.
I did hear something today about NASCAR coming back.
Really?
That they're going to race with no fans.
No fans. That's right.
And so they're going to. So people are throwing out ideas and seeing what sticks to the wall. So hopefully by the summer we'll have something. But our topic was your one or two favorite baseball players.
Yeah.
And I'd love for folks to kind of to share who are watching online.
Who's your favorite?
To share your favorites and send us a little message with that. We also got a phone caller that we wanted to get to. And before we do that, I don't know if you want to share, Bill,
Sure.
your one or two favorites?
I gave you two, and I'm going to change one.
Okay.
Brooks Robinson is my favorite of all time. Best third baseman ever played. Actually went to high school, graduated from high school with my dad. And the first sports memory, actually one of the first memories I have, being 5 years old, my dad took me to Arlington Stadium, which was just a horrible place to see a baseball game. And we waited after the Rangers and the Orioles played until the players came out, and Brooks Robinson came out and could not have been nicer. And then twice when I was working for the media after college, when the Orioles came to town, I got to see Brooks in the media room and tell him that story again. He just was a very, very, very kind guy.
Phenomenal baseball player. I mean, one of the greatest, most iconic sports plays of all time in baseball is against the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series, Game 1.
Laid out completely.
Lee May hits a line drive down the third base line, and Brooks Robinson goes to his right, and he's probably 20, 25 feet into the foul area, snags the ball.
Horizontal to the ground,
and throws a one bouncer, I believe, across the diamond to throw out Lee May on just a phenomenal, one of the greatest defensive baseball plays I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
And I've got, my favorites are probably Joe Morgan and George Foster. Just as a Reds fan growing up.
Tell me about George Foster.
George Foster was just the sideburns. Love the sideburns of George Foster. I could never grow myself though. But he had this bat called Black Beauty.
Okay.
And the 1 year I just completely just kind of fell in love with George as a baseball player. I think he had 52 home runs. So we'd have the little transistor radios, and my brother and I listened to the game.
Yeah.
And whenever it got to be like a 2-0 or 3-1 count, I'd say to my brother, he's going to hit one out. And the odds were in my favor, 52 home runs out of,
he's swinging.
That's like 1 out of eight at bats. So a lot of times I felt good because I felt like I was calling predicting a George Foster home run.
Yeah.
And Joe Morgan, just because of the way he played the game, he's not a big guy. He's 5'6", 5'8", something like that. But speed, power, just love to watch him steal bases, and was just a big fan of Joe Morgan's.
My second was Will Clark. I thought he was the best first baseman, and I loved him because of his just undying focus. He was always dialed right in. And I think you mentioned to me he had a way of looking at you that just made you want to cringe. It was terrifying. And a story for you, Will Clark's story. In 1994, so the Rangers were not doing so well, and Juan Gonzalez, their big hitter, was getting a little grief because he was not running out plays. He wasn't really giving it his all. And I was in the locker room, and I was talking to Will Clark after the game, and I said, do you get the sense that maybe some of the players on the team are not giving everything that the other players are? And I'll never forget this because it terrified me. Will Clark looked at me, and he had this way of looking and he said, there's no way I'm answering that question. You got it? I said, I got it.
That question was never asked again.
That question was never asked again.
Well, I saw, just reading the chat notes, Mary Hornback mentions Joey Votto.
Love Joey Votto.
Openly telling the public about
mental
dealing with some panic and depression that he has.
Yep. And what a great player! What a great hitter!
Phenomenal player. And I remember watching the game where he really kind of broke down on the field, and they had to he walked off, and then it was a little bit later in time where he kind of shared some of the struggles that he was having, and just a phenomenal baseball player. Love that he's a Cincinnati Red. And I'm with you, Mary. I'm a huge Joey Votto fan.
Yeah, I am too. Absolutely.
And so let me, I'm going to try the phone for a minute.
All right.
See, we had a caller
All right.
call in about being a fan. Let me see if Bob's still here. Bob, are you with us? Hey, Bob, can you share who maybe one or two of your favorite players are in baseball?
During my lifetime, Joe Morgan,
Okay.
Tony Perez.
Joe Morgan and Tony Perez.
We talked a little about Joe. Tell us about why Tony Perez.
Well, Joe Morgan and Tony Perez were both Hall of Fame players, and they did well. And then Tony Perez was good at getting game-winning hits in playoffs and World Series games. And John Bench and Pete Rose were both Hall of Fame players, but Pete Rose got banned from baseball for gambling charges, and John Bench has been in a couple few divorce marriages. Yet they were both good players. John Bench invested his money into Joe Morgan, invested their money much better with what Pete Rose did.
Well, let's talk about Tony for a minute. Tell us what else about Tony Perez you like.
Well, he was a good player. He was a good person.
Yeah, you are right about that.
He did make it to baseball's Hall of Fame. I think a couple times they would let him in the baseball's Hall of Fame, but he eventually made it.
Well, Bob, we appreciate you sharing with us. We're going to go back to some of the chats, and we're going to talk. I've actually got a few things I want to say about Tony Perez, but we appreciate the call. Thank you, Bob.
Amanda says Russell Wilson. So people may not know this, but Russell Wilson is a baseball player.
Yes.
Did you know this?
Yes.
Yep. He spent some time with can't remember which team, but in spring training. He was actually drafted.
He was drafted, and you're right. I can't remember the baseball team that drafted him. I know Bob mentioned Tony Perez, and he just Mr. Clutch to me. So whenever the Reds needed a big hit, it was Tony Perez. When the Reds won the 75 World Series in Game 7, they're losing 3-0, and it was Tony Perez who hits a 2-run home run off of they called it, I think, the moonball pitch of a guy named Bill Lee, and made it 3-2 and got the Reds rolling to where they ended up winning Game 7 and winning one of the greatest World Series of all time, 4-3 in that game. So I'm with Bob too. Big Tony Perez fan.
Are you able to read it? I cannot read these comments. My eyes are.
I can see the comments, and quite a few people are telling Bob hello. I see Amanda, David, and others are all telling Bob hello. And Elizabeth saying Bob is live. That is cool. So Bob, we appreciate you calling in and doing that. Thank you. Well, we're gonna do a little trivia too. You know what? I think we'll even let people cheat. If they want to Google it, we'll let them Google it.
You know, we can't control that. So,
we cannot control that. So we're gonna do a little trivia, and we'll do a $15 Kroger gift card.
All right.
To the person. It's a 2-part question.
Are these the questions that I know?
These are the questions you know.
Do I qualify for the $15 gift card?
You do not.
Okay.
All right. But good try.
All right.
You take it away. You do.
The first question is who did the Bengals beat in their last playoff win?
Yep. So we mentioned earlier this year, 1991 was their last playoff win.
Here's a hint. This team is not in existence anymore.
And then the second part of that question is, who did the Reds defeat in 1995 for the last playoff series win that they had? So Bill's going to check the messages coming in, and we're going to check with Bob on the phones for a minute because I think he has an answer, and we'll be right back.
All right. I'm going to have to get some glasses before next week.
Okay. Well, you have to listen. And you said the Atlanta Braves?
So the two questions. Who did the Bengals beat in their last playoff win, 1991? And who did the Reds beat in their last playoff series win? 1995 was the Reds' last.
Last time they won a playoff series. They've lost a lot of playoff series since then.
They have.
With 95 since they won. So that's 25 years and 29 years since the Bengals last won a playoff game. Now let's see here if we have some answers coming in yet. I did get an answer from Bob, but it was not correct.
I heard that, and I was surprised.
Oh, we have a response.
Ryan Snape
Ryan Snake.
comes in. I'm assuming that he's referring to the Bengals.
Yes, so the Bengals last defeated the Houston Oilers.
Absolutely.
And actually, Brian came up with that. That's the only time I can remember that doesn't technically exist anymore. They are now the Houston Texans, and but back then they were the Houston Oilers. And that's the last time the Bengals won a playoff game.
Yep.
1991. They beat the Houston Oilers. As far as the baseball question, Bob had mentioned
Actually, Brian Snape made the comment. Now the Houston Texans. That is not correct. The Houston Oilers are now the Tennessee Titans.
yes.
And the Houston Texans were an expansion team.
But we're going to give, because the baseball one was a very difficult one, we're going to give the gift card. Brian's going to get
Brian
the
gets
gift card.
the gift card.
The answer to the baseball question was actually the Los Angeles Dodgers.
And the Dodgers were favored
They were favored
dramatically in that series.
They
weren't
were. We beat the Dodgers, but then we had to play the Atlanta Braves and lost to the Atlanta Braves in 1995.
You know, when I was doing a little research for the show today, I looked at the remember the Roy Halladay divisional series game where he
no hit the Reds.
No hit the Reds. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about blood pressure. My blood pressure was not good that day.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Here's a trivia question for you. How many no hitters did Nolan Ryan throw? He's thrown more than anyone else. Do you know this one?
I don't. I'm going to take a guess and
All right.
say 7.
It is 7. It's 7, and it's at least 3 times more than the next closest person. Who, by the way, is Homer Bailey.
Homer
and a lot
Bailey's
of
got
other guys.
2 that I know
Yeah,
of.
yes.
Does anybody have more than 2?
I don't think anyone has more than 2.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, 7. Can you believe that?
That's amazing.
Yeah. You know, Nolan Ryan was the first guy to throw 100 miles an hour. And on August 22nd, 1987, I was at Arlington Stadium to see Nolan Ryan strike out Ricky Henderson for his 5,000th strikeout.
He had 5,000 strikeouts?
Yep.
Oh, my goodness.
Yep. Struck out Ricky Henderson.
Oh, that's a tough guy to strike out. But yeah, Nolan Ryan, well, he wasn't afraid of anybody. So.
No, he wasn't. Do you remember when Robin Ventura charged the mound?
I do.
Nolan Ryan just took it, bam, 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 took him right. And Robin Ventura was what, 25 years old. Nolan Ryan was pushing 45. At this time. Yeah.
You talk about country strong.
Yes, the country
Nolan
strong.
Ryan was very country strong.
That's a very good way to put it.
Well, we do have one little joke too. It's kind of a joke / trivia question. So I threw this one to Bill yesterday,
and I liked it.
So our little joke / trivia question, and feel free to respond if you can figure it out, is where is the largest diamond located in New York City?
The largest diamond in New York City.
Where is it located?
And by the way, if somebody listening, somebody watching wants to come on and tell us about their favorite sports moments next time, let us know, because we'd love to hear from you guys. Love to hear what you remember, what you liked, who your favorite players were.
And our goal is to as we progress with this, to make it as interactive as possible.
Absolutely.
So we're still learning, because this is our first time, and
we are.
We want to definitely try to get those of you watching or listening involved as much as possible. Anybody know where the largest diamond is located in New York?
Elizabeth says the Dodgers of old. Elizabeth, are you talking about the Brooklyn Dodgers and the? We had a Subway Series.
It was the New York Yankees
and
Mets.
Yep, and then we had what did we call the Subway Series when the Oakland A's played the San Francisco Giants and the earthquake happened in '88?
I always remember it was the earthquake series.
The earthquake series.
It's one of the strangest things there. You're watching a game and all of a sudden your cameras are just vibrating, and then I think it was Al Michelson. We're having an earthquake, and his players got on the field, and just one of those moments like in my mind, I just remember, it's one of those things you never forget.
What's the quintessential Al Michaels quote?
Oh, wait a minute. We have an answer. We have.
Wow, Elizabeth, you know what? Ebbets Field. Elizabeth says Ebbets Field. And to be fair, it is a baseball field, and I don't know if Ebbets Field is larger or was larger than Yankee Stadium. The Polo Grounds was quite a bit larger than Yankee Stadium. I don't know. So, Elizabeth, you may have snuck in with an answer that we did not know.
Yes, but the answer was supposed to be Yankee Stadium. So where's the largest diamond located in New York City? And that diamond being the baseball diamond of Yankee Stadium.
Do you believe in miracles, Brian Snape? There it is. That's the quintessential Al Michaels quote.
Al Michaels is phenomenal.
And you know that when the U.S. won that game against Russia, that was not the gold medal game.
No, that was the game leading up to that.
And do you remember who the gold medal game was against?
The Czechoslovakia?
I want to say Finland.
I think you're right. It was Finland.
I'm not sure about that.
I think you're right.
Brian Snape will tell us.
Yes, he will. Because things that we do not know, Brian knows just about everything.
Yeah.
And I will say Brian is one of the smartest people I've ever met.
I completely agree with you.
And Al Michaels, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but Al Michaels was an announcer for the Cincinnati Reds.
I didn't know that.
He was the announcer, I believe, right before Marty Brennaman. In 1972, I think might have been right around that time. 72 or 73 was Al Michaels' last year broadcasting for the Reds, and then he went on to great fame elsewhere.
Now, Marty Brennaman is in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yes.
What for?
I believe just sports broadcasting.
I thought that for some reason that it was for calling the longest game, maybe.
Oh, I don't
in
know.
baseball history, because I don't think he was voted in, just on his broadcasting. I think there was a specific reason that he made it into the Hall of Fame, tangentially. I may be wrong, but I think it was maybe one of the longest games.
Well, we'll either have to Google it or ask Brian, because I was kind of like, because Google's here and Brian is right there. So
yes.
One of those two will know the answer.
Sweden. Thank you,
Brian.
Was not Finland.
Well, we're starting to wind this down. We got one last thing we did want to talk about, and it's one of my favorite coaches of all time is a man named John Wooden.
Absolutely.
And he coached at UCLA, the UCLA Bruins,
and won 10 in a row.
I believe that's
10
in a row, or 10 out of 11 national college basketball championships. And John Wooden's known not only as a great basketball coach, but just a great human being. And he's got some wonderful books out there. I've read a couple of those books. And
what he taught those kids on the basketball court was nothing compared to what he taught them about life.
Exactly.
And that's what he wanted to do.
And he learned a lot about life from his father. And his father taught him a 7-point creed. And that's one of the things we're going to try to wrap up maybe each show with for at least the next 7 shows, since there's 7 points to it, is one of the points on that creed. And his father told him, look, John, if you do these 7 things well in life, you're going to do just fine. And so the first point on that creed was to be true to yourself. And, if you have integrity and integrity begins with you, you're going to do quite well. And so if you're not true to yourself, how can you be true to other people?
To anyone else.
And when it comes to integrity, we all really know kind of right from wrong. And the line I love that either John's father taught him or John thought of himself was, there are no moral and ethical holidays. So you can't, and that is so true. You can't take a day off from your morals and your ethics.
And I always get goosebumps when I read integrity begins with you.
And so we just want to kind of wrap it up with, hopefully you took away a little bit more sports knowledge, maybe a couple of chuckles, but also we wanted to kind of give you something too that, because of the work that we do here at the Recovery Center, so that you can kind of build upon with the 7-point creed. And so we wanted to leave you with that. And
thank you guys very much for being part of our community.
We really appreciate all of you. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and thanks to Bob for calling and listening in, and hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday at 10:30.
Did you have a good time?
I had a great time.
I had a great
Thank
time.
you for doing it.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you,
We'll see
everybody.
you guys.
Bye, Bob. You too. Yeah.